I'm J.G. Michael, and this is Parallax Views.
Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. Independent media matters, and your support makes it possible. If Parallax Views has challenged your thinking, exposed you to new ideas, or simply kept you company on your commute, now's the time to help sustain it. Listen, share, and if you can, support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. If you want, you can also make a one-time donation by contacting me at parallaxviewspod@protonmail.com. I can give you a link to my PayPal page if you contact me that way. Let's show what listener-supported media can do. Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the program, we welcome back to the show longtime journalist Eric Margolis, who has had an incredibly storied career. He rode with the Mujahideen during the Soviet-Afghan conflict, was the first Western journalist admitted to the KGB headquarters in Moscow to interview senior officials there, and has covered conflicts in Angola, South Africa, Kashmir, India, Pakistan, El Salvador, and elsewhere. On this edition of the program, we'll be speaking with him about his thoughts on the Jeffrey Epstein case, which should be rather interesting because he was actually at a Jeffrey Epstein luncheon, where Ghislaine Maxwell, Alan Dershowitz, and others were present. And as you'll find out in the conversation to follow, he was offered a massage, which he turned down, and he thought something was up with that. I'll put it that way. He has his own thoughts on the Epstein case. Specifically, he believes that Epstein was running a honey trap, and that this was part of an intelligence operation with Mossad fingerprints on it. I know that's a very controversial claim, and as you, my listeners, will know, I'm not interested in pushing anti-Semitic tropes or the type of lines we're hearing from figures like Kanye West or Ye, but I think that it is possible to talk about the question of Israeli intelligence operations without going down the rabbit hole of, well, let's just put it bluntly, Jew baiting. I myself am not saying that the Epstein scandal was a Mossad operation, but given things like Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and his ties, or alleged ties, to Israeli intelligence, which many consider an open secret, I think it's okay to discuss the question of potential Israeli intelligence and the Epstein case ties, with the caveat that we have to be very careful about how we discuss these matters. So, with that in mind, I hope you'll find this conversation with Eric Margolis to be interesting. And now, on to the conversation. Welcome back to Parallax Views, a guest that I'm always interested to be speaking with. He's written for a number of publications over the years, and I found his book, American Raj, to be very formative in the Bush years during the global war on terror. Longtime journalist Eric Margolis, how are you doing?
I'm holding up. I'm watching. There's too much news. It's hard to digest it all, but I'm trying.
So I wanted to have you back on after I read your piece, The Epstein Scandal. Not the first time you've written about Epstein. You also had another piece entitled The Honey Pot, or The Honey Trap, on East 71st Street back in 2019. And you actually had a chance to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell and basically convert with the Epstein crowd. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. And I had to look it up. You're actually in the Little Black Book on page 35. Yes. So I don't know why your name was in there, but I was curious. How did you learn about these people or get involved
I
with them?
was, well, apparently I'd known Ghislaine Maxwell for some years previously, known her socially, nothing important to report. Just I'm a native New Yorker and moving around New York and seeing people. I, of course, ran into her. And it seems, looking at my records, I see that I was also with her in Palm Beach as well as New York. But again, nothing, no explosive news.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about the sort of strange experience you had on East 71st Street, because I thought that was telling, and the fact that you knew something was up at that point.
The reason I remember it so well, and there's a lot of things I don't remember, but when I arrived in Epstein's palatial mansion, supposedly the largest private house home in New York City on East 71st Street, um, near to where I lived, I walked in the door and with some friends of mine from Canada. And the first thing some functionary asked me if I would like a massage. And I found this very odd, to say the least. First of all, I couldn't think why. Uh, and more important, what was the point of that? Well, I'm an old Middle Eastern and old Soviet Union hand. I've been seeing lots of honey traps in my time and lots of attempts at blackmailing people, squeezing them. And so this just set off alarm bells in my mind. This is a circa 1990 Moscow. And even the Russians were much more sophisticated than that. I mean, this was just kind of crude. Anyway, so I said politely, no, thank you. And in I went to a luncheon that included much of the good and great of New York City, certainly its leading real estate tycoons.
And was there anything else to that experience that was of interest? I think you even said that Dershowitz may have been there.
He
Um,
was, he was.
okay. And I've always wondered about Maxwell and her, I guess, thoughts on her father's passing. I think you said in the article that she believed that, you could get the KGB Moscow Center to release satellite photos or something related to
That's
the.
right. That was anxious to talk to me because I had some small bit of influence at KGB, and at least I was known there, and I'd been there. And she thought maybe I could coax the KGB to give this satellite photographs of the area, Mediterranean area, where he allegedly fell overboard or was pushed. She believed strongly that he was murdered.
Now, there's a lot to unpack there. What do you think? Well, first, I want to get into this. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the history of honey traps and blackmail operations as they relate to intelligence, because I think you have insights into that, and maybe you can help my listeners understand how said operations work historically and why you see that in the Epstein case.
Well, it's that technique of the honey trap was old when Babylon was young. It, as the hookers used to say, men think with their 6 or 7 inch brains, and men are invariably susceptible to female approaches, particularly if they've been drinking. And the honey trap where you get somebody important and photograph them in compromising positions this is a standard technique of all the intelligence services, and particularly the British and the Russians used it a lot. The Americans used it. They employ hookers to seduce foreign diplomats and then get them on film and threaten to send the films to their family. The media, it works. It's a low cost, low risk technique.
And maybe if you could, I want to get more into, since we mentioned Robert Maxwell, I think that's a good point to bring in the question of Israeli intelligence, because there was a book I was trying to speak with the author, but he's not talking about the Epstein case anymore. But there was a book, I think it was called Israel Super Spy, about Robert Maxwell. And it seems he had Mossad ties. And it also seems that way with Epstein. So can you speak to that a little bit and your thoughts on that and
I think
piecing it all together?
yeah, you're right in both cases. Maxwell, for sure, was definitely working with Mossad. It's an openly known secret. He was a poor Czech who came out of post-Soviet, post-communist Czechoslovakia and came to England with nothing from nowhere and managed to create a very important publishing company called Pergamon Press that had the right to publish all kinds of technical Soviet books. And he made his money, base of his fortune, on this. And he then got involved in politics. He bought the Daily Mail newspaper, hugely influential newspaper, and he was known to hew the KGB line in whatever they wanted him to do. And he was tremendously successful. However, his cupidity overcame him. He started taking money from in England. You have to keep up with your peers, the great and the good, in England the rich and the royals, and that means needing ever more money. And he did. He started looting his company's retirement fund and gradually drove himself into bankruptcy. He was a widely hated and widely feared man, very brilliant. Guylaine was one of his children.
And I wanted to talk about, I think even figures in Israel have alluded to the fact that he was tied to Israeli intelligence.
Allegedly.
How important do you think it is to talk about the Israeli intelligence alleged ties to the Epstein case?
Well, they're there. The question is, how much do we make of them? Um, the Maxwell pair was not a spy, as the word is overused. He was an agent of influence, and he provided a great deal of influential influence and support uh, to the Israeli cause. And the Israelis knew this. That's why I believe he's being buried on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, an honored resting place for a Jewish person.
Quick edit here. I want to note that Robert Maxwell was buried at the Mount of Olives, not Mount Zion. It's easy to get the two confused, and I think that Eric just misspoke. Like Mount Zion, it is a significant place to be buried.
So that was pretty well known. Very pro-Israeli newspaper. Um, he may have been involved in a network of agents of influence, spies. Um, I tend to think so, but I don't have any proof. But I think the full story will come out.
In terms of what has happened now with Donald Trump sort of backing off the Epstein case, what do you think is going on there? And what are the questions we should be asking? You're a longtime journalist, so I feel like you have an idea of, well, where should our eyes be and our ears be when it comes to this?
Well, it is what the French call an Italian scandal, scandale italien, meaning that it is unbelievably complicated. It's so complicated nobody can understand it, and it goes on without end, and on and on. And this is really an Italian scandal, even though it dealt with Jeffrey Epstein in New York City. Uh, it, I knew him for years. I knew of him, met him a couple of times. Uh, he was really in the swim in New York City high society, not high, not social society, but it being in the right society, knowing the most important, influential people. Uh, I I'm amazed that Epstein was allowed to get away with his what I believe was a blackmail campaign in New York against prominent people, and that so many influential New Yorkers went along with it and didn't squawk. So,
I want to ask you, in terms of that, one of the most interesting aspects of this case is that there's still this question, and you bring it up in your article, of where did this man's wealth come from?
oh. Well, I just had a new thought last night, well, endlessly watching this story unfold. He had a partner in the finance business, and they set up a fund. Uh, I can't remember immediately his name, um, Blumenberg or something like that. And he claimed that Epstein looted the fund and took all the money. It was about $100 million, and absconded with the money and used it for his own purposes. That's one theory. Otherwise, the money had to come from blackmail victims or from a intelligence organization that was engineering Epstein's work.
Do you think this was a blackmail operation with state ties, or do you think it was? I mean, I know this is speculative, but do you think this is like a state-run thing that went on with Epstein, or did it have state fingerprints, but was sort of a privately run thing by Epstein as like a criminal enterprise? Where do you stand on that?
I suspect that that a state was involved behind it. There was too much money involved in the whole, and the people who were targeted had interesting things to add to the equation. So, uh, and the size of the operation suggests that it was state sponsored.
One of the most interesting aspects of the article she wrote was, and I know this will be controversial for some, but I want to get into it. Uh, President Clinton and his sexual escapades, the Lewinsky scandal, and this issue of Compromise. Recently, Ryan Grimm of Dropsite News wrote an article entitled, "Did Benjamin Netanyahu blackmail Bill Clinton over the Monica Lewinsky sex tapes?" And a lot of people are giving a lot of credit to Ryan Grimm right now for bringing this issue back up. I've seen a few mainstream publications even cover what Ryan Grimm is saying about it. But you were covering this years ago, the sort of question of, you know, was Clinton ensnared by a blackmail operation? Can you speak to the Clinton case?
Well, yes, I remember digging into this and writing about it, and it was a big deal at the time. What we thought we knew was that the Pentagon, and its deep wisdom, decided to buy a brand new high-tech Israeli telephone switching system. And this system was installed in the White House, but in the back of the system was a hidden trap door that allowed the Israelis to get into the system and monitor the message. This they did, and they came across all kinds of compromising material regarding Bill Clinton's exuberant love life. And they were able to pressure, according to this theory, they were able to pressure Clinton into doing things, particularly the camp, having to do the Arab-Israeli Accords, and involved in the middle of this was the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who was also named in the latest scandal, the Black Book, Epstein Black Book thing. And the we don't know the ramifications of the thing, but certainly the Americans were left red-faced when they found out that their vaunted telesecurity had been compromised.
It's interesting too because I think in this Ryan Grimm piece from July 25th, he brings, I believe, the Jonathan Pollard case into this. And I was wondering if you could talk. I know this may seem off topic, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Jonathan Pollard case because it's very interesting. This article claims that Netanyahu was trying to use the Lewinsky scandal and these sex tapes and blackmail Clinton to basically get Pollard released. Pollard, of course, for people that don't know, was basically an Israeli spy. And a lot of people have forgotten that case, but during his first term, Trump actually pardoned Pollard's handlers. So it feels like the Jonathan Pollard case keeps cropping up.
Well, I followed it closely. It was a particularly nasty piece of business. Pollard was, we were before defining the difference between an agent and a spy. Well, Pollard was 100% spy, no doubt about it. He was a very effective one too, and he got some of America's deepest secrets. The former U.S. Secretary of Defense, I think, said that it was one of the worst cases of espionage in U.S. history, not some minor peccadillo. Well, Pollard was so well thought of in Israel that they did a full court press to try and get Pollard released. And it eventually he did work and he was released from prison.
How important do you think it is to look back on cases like Jonathan Pollard when trying to understand the Epstein case? I mean, I know they're two separate cases, but I feel like a lot of this espionage stuff gets overlooked in a lot of the mainstream media. You get accused of being a conspiracy theorist. And I think that really misses the boat on a lot of hard questions that need to be asked.
Well, there are conspiracies everywhere. A former French prime minister named Perrier, uh, easy name to remember, said that all government is conspiracy. And he's probably right. It's certainly so in France. Um, the the Pollard case involved not only espionage, but it involved prominent Americans trying to cover up for him, trying to release him, trying to tamp down any kind of scandal from his thing. So it was real. And why it was it? Because it is the same structure as the Epstein scandal, picking on very prominent people, going after specific things, um, not identical, but both very high level espionage.
Now, one thing that you sort of deal with in your own two pieces on uh, this whole sordid affair of Jeffrey Epstein is the way in which there seems to be or could be, I think there's a circumstantial case to be made at the very least that there's a connection between U.S. policy geopolitically and, you know, sort of honey trap and intelligence operations against the United States.
It happens. As I said earlier, everybody resorts to these sordid ploys when necessary. And we Americans are not above this. Believe me, as I said, with CIA's use it a lot. Um, and c'est la vie, as the French say, for everyone.
Well, it would go a long way in explaining, as you put it, why does the U.S. allow and fund Israel's far-right government to massacre hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and attack Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen? And I like how you put it. You said the answer seems obvious, though we have no hard proof yet. So I was wondering if you could speak more to that, and where you think Trump will go from here.
Well, we Trump is backing, trying to back out of this whole Gaza mess, while not angering his MAGA supporters who believe that Muslims are the devils. So he's is doing that, but at the same time, he's trying to maneuver. Half of his funds, I think, come from pro-Israel sources. So he has to be cautious. I mean, one Israeli source gave $100 million. That's a lot of money. Not maybe as almost as much as the airplane that the Qataris gave him. Um, Money plays a big role in all of this, and Trump has an investment in the Israel lobby. He's their Trojan horse in Washington, and he really is very strong pro-Israel supporter, always has been, and the men around him are as well. So they're stuck in this situation of what looks like a Nazi-style massacre of people in World War II, at the same time trying to keep his supporters in line.
It's interesting. I know this, I hope this isn't too off topic, but in talking about Epstein, we also ended up talking about New York. And you recently wrote a piece, sort of taking shots at the sort of panic that we're seeing right now over Zohran Mamdani and his sort
Right.
of rise to prominence. There's this sort of the Muslims are coming, the Muslims are coming. The APAC types are all aligning against him. I'm assuming Alan Dershowitz, among others, is blowing a gasket right now. And I think your piece on that was very interesting because you're saying that this could be indicative of a change in the New York political machine, which is very tied to the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Well, it is, and nothing is more deeply corrupt than New York politics. I say this as a New Yorker, but and I started running for Congress from New York once many years ago. Uh, it's a cesspool, a snake pit, and but it's all built on ethnic groups. And the reason that New York stayed Democratic for so long is because Tammany Hall, which ran New York City, Tammany Hall kept taking any new immigrants to New York. It would embrace them and give them free pizza or something like that. And they built great loyalty among the ethnic communities.
Yeah, it's the old sort of boss tweed.
Well, exactly. Exactly. So New York is disgusting. Um, I was delighted by this Madani character who came along only because he put the fear of God into New York's uh, power shape is. And of course, the pro-Israel crowd in New York is the largest Jewish city in the world, uh, really gave them a scare and produced some very interesting political fireworks.
Where do you see, I guess, U.S. policy heading from here when it comes to Israel? And do you think things like what's happening in Gaza are sort of changing perceptions now?
Well, I think they will. It is my hope, as someone who's been watching the Middle East. I went to live in Egypt when I was 14 years old, so I'm at this for a long time. I pray that we may be seeing the first faint beginnings of a settlement in Palestine, which I have written and I believe must entail a Palestinian state, as was mandated in the original 1948 UN, 47, 48 UN resolutions that created Israel. So, and then the Arabs stabbed the Palestinians in the back. Um, it's a rum bunch, as the British would say. Uh, but I think there's a hope. But the Israelis have such influence in Washington and London that they will do their damnedest to block any settlement. They want more land. They want the Palestinians' land. They want the Palestinians sent to Antarctica. They want the status quo, and they will probably get it.
Before we start closing out, to go back to Epstein and just, I guess, New York politics and the sort of underbelly of it, the seedy side of New York politics, you've seen it up close in a lot of different ways. What do you think people don't understand about how New York works, how that real estate world works, how that high society that Epstein belonged to, works?
Well, people don't understand how it's all built on credit. First of all, bank credit and funny, fishy loans and funny money and all sorts of illicit or unkosher financial mechanisms. Um, and the amounts of money in New York are huge. They're really huge. New York regards the rest of the country as a backwards third world country, as Trump would say. Particularly the New York real estate men, who I know quite well, are they say there's New York and Israel for them. And they don't care about the rest of the country. It's flyover country, as they call it. So uh, it's it's a really complicated, incestuous uh, society that is so far above and distant from the rest of the U.S. I mean, when you look at the average doorman in New York, apartment buildings, probably makes more money than the average industrial worker in the Midwest. And it's a different place. I remember when I was in the Army, people found out I was from New York. They became hurling insults at me, punching me. Goddamn New York, and other rude noises. So New York is very different. It is not part of the USA.
Do you think that's how someone like Epstein ended up flourishing in New York?
Oh, he did, because it's also a very small town in the sense that everybody knows everybody and you can flourish pretty well, that money is the king, and that Epstein was to gain tremendous influence thanks to a small number of people.
In terms of the Epstein case itself, is there anything else you want to say about that? Because I think there's a lot that people are maybe missing about it, and I think you have an interesting take on it because listen, I was telling someone I was having you on today, and I said, Eric has seen so much. I mean, he's, been to Afghanistan. He's, covered these different wars. He knows about intelligence operations. So you have a storied history and a really sort of panoptic view of this stuff. You have the bird's eye view in a lot of ways because you have all that historical knowledge. What do you think people are missing in the Epstein story?
It's too complicated for most people. I said Italian scandal, they don't really understand it. They don't understand what's involved with Israel involved, confuses a lot of people. And most of the problem is that the story trails over a long period of time. And everybody's got these different conspiracy theories the Trump people have done a lot to muddy the waters. So people can't be blamed for having trouble understanding.
I also wanted to ask, I forgot to ask earlier, but you mentioned one of Adnan Khashoggi's, uh, I guess, chief female seductresses, AN.
Yeah,
Was there a reason you brought that up in the article? I was just curious how you felt that tied in.
because there are fleeting reports that Khashoggi was somehow involved with uh, Epstein and was running a sort of a compromise operation using some of his girls.
I also wanted to ask, having known people like that, what are how do you tell? Like you knew immediately when you were offered that massage, you're like, oh, this is come on. How stupid do they think we are? Like
Exactly.
what are the like how do you know? You know what I mean? I know I will have listeners that want to understand like how do you know when something is up and there's an operation going on or a honey trap?
Oh, it was out of place. It was lunchtime in New York City on 71st Street. You just don't get offered a massage when you go to lunch in somebody's house. And it's obvious that it was being filmed. Though to me, it was anyway. I mean, I've been around this for a long time. You can smell it when people are trying to compromise you.
Anything else you wanted to say in closing, or is there anything I didn't cover from the articles that you think is really worth digging into for a minute or two here?
Well, I will remember after the program to tell you, but let me think about it for a second. Um, the frightening thing, I think that this whole story with Ghislaine Maxwell has been blown out of proportion. The media has approached child molestation with hysteria, and everybody's making a big deal over it. The big deal of this story is not underage girls, and underage is like 14, 15, not so much underage girls as it is, in fact, national intelligence has been compromised, and things are going on under our noses that we don't even know. So, where did the money come from for this operation? Where was the information going? And why don't we go after who find was behind Epstein? I don't believe he died naturally from a suicide, as they used to call it, Texas-side in the old days of Lyndon Johnson. Um, I don't. I think he was suicided, as they say in Texas. And Billy Saul Estes, if you can remember back that far, um, there's too many mysteries, and they're already trying to hush everything up.
That leads into the last thing I wanted to hit on here. Before we started recording, I was telling you that I face problems with sort of the way these digital platforms can be at times. and you said it's like 1984 Big Brother. The fact that there's such a push to shut down conversation at this point, what do you think that's indicative of? I mean, you're a longtime journalist. Have you ever seen anything like this before? And do you think it means the powers that be are afraid?
All along, I've seen similar things where special groups are trying to censor information, promote their own view, squash heretical views, etc. We live with it. I've often said, I remember when I was covering the Soviet Union, that speech and opinion there was freer than it is in the US today. There was the media knew there were certain things that it could not say, but on the other hand, they couldn't say Brezhnev was a drunk or something like that. But they were cautious; they censored themselves. Today in the U.S., we feel the tendrils of control everywhere.
I just noticed this in your article. You mentioned that you said teenage hookers are found on the fringes of high society, and I think that was interesting in regards to what you said about Maxwell. You said the focus on is on Maxwell and child molestation, but I think when you say, teenage hookers are always found in these places on the fringe of that sort of high society, is that sort of what you meant when you said,
Sure, I
the
did.
part that we need to really look at is how
I
there seems to
did.
be intelligence tied?
I used to know a teenage hooker ring. I used to help some of them with their homework, and they were getting clients uh, later on in the day, and it was very common. In my recent article, I mentioned in France the scandal of the Ballet Bleu and Ballet Rose, which were famous scandals when underage girls and boys uh, used by the upper echelons of French society. It's common and everywhere. It was in Russia too. You find it in the Middle East. Uh, I'm, I think it's a crime, but it's common.
And that's why you're saying the scandal beneath all of this is even more important.
Yes, the real story is, as I said, espionage. It's not underage sex and Ghislaine Maxwell and things like that. And I know her type. I know some other girls like that who just to spend their life providing naughty services to men. Very lucrative profession. So that turns me against them, but it doesn't uh, shouldn't make us ignore the obvious elephant in the room. Who's benefiting from all this?
Was there a reason you think she was so? I mean, I obviously it's because it was her father, Robert Maxwell, and the way he died. But was what did you think of her obsession with, wanting to know how he died?
Well,
I hope
because
that's not a dumb question.
she was no, it's not. She was very convinced that he was murdered, and she wanted to that he did not jump off his yacht into the Mediterranean. He's a pretty big fat man, so I doubt that he could have done so. But no, that she wants it, and the rest of her family, which is extensive and influential, also wanted to get at the story.
Did she think it was like Mossad or KGB, or did she not say?
She didn't say.
Okay. Do you have a hunch on this? I mean, what's your take on the Robert Maxwell case?
Dead men tell no tales, and I think it was very neatly done. If it may have been Mossad, they're very efficient assassins, as we saw recently in the Middle East. So that is their specialty.
Well, Eric, I know I kept you a little bit over. I appreciate your taking time to speak with me again. I always enjoy the conversation.
So do I.
How can my listeners keep up with your columns and your work? I know is ericmargolis.com the main place?
Yes, or .org, ericmargolis.org.
Okay, thank you again.
Many thanks to you for such a witty and educated and erudite interview.
I'm J.G. Michael, and this is Parallax Views.
Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. Independent media matters, and your support makes it possible. If Parallax Views has challenged your thinking, exposed you to new ideas, or simply kept you company on your commute, now's the time to help sustain it. Listen, share, and if you can, support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/parallaxviews. One more time, that's patreon.com/parallaxviews. If you want, you can also make a one-time donation by contacting me at parallaxviewspod@protonmail.com. I can give you a link to my PayPal page if you contact me that way. Let's show what listener-supported media can do.
Hey there, Parallax Views listeners. On this edition of the program, we welcome back to the show longtime journalist Eric Margolis, who has had an incredibly storied career. He rode with the Mujahideen during the Soviet-Afghan conflict, was the first Western journalist admitted to the KGB headquarters in Moscow to interview senior officials there, and has covered conflicts in Angola, South Africa, Kashmir, India, Pakistan, El Salvador, and elsewhere. On this edition of the program, we'll be speaking with him about his thoughts on the Jeffrey Epstein case, which should be rather interesting because he was actually at a Jeffrey Epstein luncheon, where Ghislaine Maxwell, Alan Dershowitz, and others were present. And as you'll find out in the conversation to follow, he was offered a massage, which he turned down, and he thought something was up with that. I'll put it that way. He has his own thoughts on the Epstein case. Specifically, he believes that Epstein was running a honey trap, and that this was part of an intelligence operation with Mossad fingerprints on it. I know that's a very controversial claim, and as you, my listeners, will know, I'm not interested in pushing anti-Semitic tropes or the type of lines we're hearing from figures like Kanye West or Ye, but I think that it is possible to talk about the question of Israeli intelligence operations without going down the rabbit hole of, well, let's just put it bluntly, Jew baiting. I myself am not saying that the Epstein scandal was a Mossad operation, but given things like Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and his ties or alleged ties to Israeli intelligence, which many consider an open secret, I think it's okay to discuss the question of potential Israeli intelligence and the Epstein case ties, with the caveat that we have to be very careful about how we discuss these matters. So, with that in mind, I hope you'll find this conversation with Eric Margolis to be interesting. And now, on to the conversation.